I want to start out today's press briefing by giving you a briefing on my recent trip to New York. That was actually last week, and it was a last moment decision to join the Kingdom delegation that went to the 72nd General Assembly of the UN. Ironically, the invitation to the Parliament of St. Martin to be part of the Kingdom delegation was sent on September the 5th. That date alone would tell you why the invitation was not received by the Parliament of St. Martin, and it was only on the 12th of October that we received a reminder about that trip taking place. It is a trip consisting of political representatives, actually members of parliament of the 4 countries, as well as members of civil society. 1 representative of the women organizations and 1 representative of the youth organizations. So the delegation consisted of 14 persons. It is called the Parliamentary Civil Delegation to the General Assembly of the UN. So to make a long story short, because indeed the story was long, first of all, getting on flights to New York at that very late hour was a challenge on its own, and Incel not flying on the Monday. But as I reported, when I arrived in New York, I managed to get there and managed to be part of the delegation. This political civil delegation to the 72nd General Assembly of the UN had the opportunity, through the permanent mission of the Kingdom to the UN, there is a permanent mission of the Kingdom to the UN stationed in New York. They coordinated this trip of parliamentarians and others to New York and arranged several visits to meetings of the United Nations, for example, the Security Council of the United Nations, the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, as well as discussions on many topics, and most of them very relevant to St. Martin. Topics such as migration, human rights, extremists, and that was a presentation taken especially from the angle of extremism in Africa. We also had a discussion with the Italian ambassador at the Italian mission, because as you might know, the Italian and Dutch ministers had agreed to share the term of the seat on the Security Council of the UN. And so the Italian government actually had their term on the Security Council is coming to an end, and the Kingdom will be taken over. So you're actually having a sort of a transfer. That was a mutual agreement between the 2 countries. And so we also had a talk with the Italian ambassador and other matters such as the UN reform. There is a lot of talk presently going on about reforms that are necessary in the whole United Nations organization. We were privy to some of this information as well and had discussions on that. A very important matter for St. Martin is, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals, the global SDGs, as we call them, and the government of the Kingdom subscribes to these SDGs as have been presented, the 17 SDGs, and St. Martin as well. And so matters like climate change, oceans, water, I mean, you name it, these are cardinal issues also as far as St. Martin is concerned. As I also mentioned, the coming fresh out of the experience of Hurricane Irma, like I was, some of the issues that were brought forward hit home. And the situation not only on St. Martin following the devastation of Irma and in some cases Maria lives. It lives as a topic. It lives as a realization that something needs to be done in terms of the vulnerability of especially small island states as far as it pertains to climate change and the effects on these small island states of climate change. So those, in that trend, the discussions took place, and it was a week of meetings, of discussions, and of information gathering, especially where the UN and the many agencies that form part of the UN, the United Nations body. This week is a week of parliamentary meetings, and we will be continuing today, Tuesday, and hopefully finalize a meeting that has been ongoing for a while, and that is the meeting that was requested with the Prime Minister on the matter of preparedness, actions, etc., during and the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. This meeting is in its final stage, in which now the Prime Minister will be responding to the second round of questions as posed by members of Parliament. That will be today. During the course of the week, you will also have the appointment of chairpersons and vice chairpersons of the different committees of Parliament. That also has to take place in a public meeting, firstly in a central committee and then in a public meeting. It's nothing long, it's just that the members who have been appointed to these committees, those members of each individual committee will now select from amongst themselves a person to chair all of the committees, and a person to, not one person, persons to chair all of the committees, and persons to be vice chairs of all of the committees. So that's how the schedule looks like. We also have a request of the made by a faction in Parliament for another meeting with government pertaining to the finances of the finances available to government, the state of the finances, etc. And that meeting too will take place later this week. As the President of Parliament, I too have asked the government in a letter to provide the Parliament of St. Martin with as much information as possible regarding the finances of the country, the financial outlook of the financial outlook for the country, St. Martin, potential sources of funding, be it by grants or loan, that we can be looking forward to, because I think Parliament needs to step up to the plate and have these discussions as members of Parliament, get the information, have discussions, and be able to give an indication as to how Parliament believes we can move forward. St. Martin today finds itself in dire straits, clearly, and it is because of what we have suffered as a small island due to the passage of Hurricane Irma. We are facing challenges like we could not even imagine that we would ever have to be facing these type of challenges going forward. And so I believe, again, that Parliament should take up that role and also be part of the discussion, be part of the representation of the people of St. Martin. Because if members of Parliament, as we are looking for information, are looking for indications and to get an understanding as to the direction of St. Martin, you can only imagine what the average man and woman out there are wondering their, their feelings of wanting information, knowing what is going to happen. If it lives with members of parliament, you can just imagine how it lives for members of the general public. So that matter of Parliament's role and how we are able to kind of proactively deal with matters that are facing our country is something that I want to encourage as the chairperson of Parliament. There is no set guideline as to how to do this, but I believe that the very fact that the rules of order establishes that the President of Parliament represents Parliament, that I can also maybe, it could be considered going out on a limb, but I think that that relationship between Parliament and government needs to change, and it can change if Parliament is more proactively involved with some of the questions that are before all of us, before government, before the people, and before Parliament as well. One of those issues that is before government, the people, and Parliament is the issue of which I consider right now at this moment, an impasse between the Dutch government, so the government of the Netherlands, and the government of St. Martin. Much has been said and written about this situation. The fact remains that right after the hurricane, the Dutch and the Kingdom government, nearly the same but not the same, the Dutch and the Kingdom government came out and made it abundantly clear that help would be forthcoming to St. Martin. I remember some of the statements very clearly. For example, that St. Martin is a part of the kingdom, and St. Martin is a kingdom's responsibility foremost and first. That, of course, was good to hear, knowing as we awoke out of Irma and realized the kind of devastation that our island had suffered and what it will take to even start rebuilding and rebounding back. It was good to hear those type of things, those type of statements rather, coming from the kingdom and the Netherlands in particular. A lot happened since then. Emergency help was up and coming swiftly. Material and stuff was sent to St. Martin, and again, not only from the Dutch kingdom, but practically from all over the world. Now that we are able to see before us a little more clearly, it is a daunting picture that is in front of us. When the question started to come up in terms of what does this commitment of the Dutch government means, we were informed first verbally, sort of via, sort of throwing it out. At the end of the day, very specifically, and now I'm talking about the information that I have received. We received the letter of the outgoing Minister of Kingdom Affairs, Minister Plasterk, on the 13th of October, in which the conditions for St. Martin to receive the financial aid that was promised and pledged, those conditions are outlined. It comes down to two general issues, and you would recall that before that formal answer was sent to the government of St. Martin, seeing where this matter could have headed and where I believe it is currently heading, I had asked the Kingdom government to consider not attaching those particular conditions to granting St. Martin the financial aid. I said it, and I am not to join those for and those against. I was very careful in selecting my words in the letter, and I indicated that to make those conditions a conditio sine qua non at this moment is very unfortunate. They shouldn't be, in my opinion, attached to the financial aid that has been promised, which from all indications is going to be significant. However, having stated that, we need to, in my opinion, in order not to get lost in the bigger cloud and discussion about who is in favor or not of an integrity chamber, I think we need to look at the matter of the integrity chamber. I'm not going to rehash the whole history, but I want to take it from the point where the government of St. Martin objected to the intention of the kingdom government to issue an instruction, to issue Article 51, as we call it, instruction on St. Martin. In order to object to that, because you would recall what happened was that the Dutch/the kingdom government, after a long time of not doing anything, appointed a quartermaster. That part of the history on the integrity chamber, I hope, is known. However, in order to object to what the kingdom government was planning to do with Article 51, the government of St. Martin needed to refer to the appeal possibility as put in the protocol which was signed between the Netherlands and St. Martin in 2015. So using that possibility of an appeal, basically the two governments had agreed that they would fall back on the protocol of 2015. They signed an agreement in July of 2017. The government of St. Martin, in consultation with the technocrats of the Dutch government, started the process of a national ordinance for the integrity chamber. And I emphasize national ordinance because the national ordinance on the integrity chamber is supposed to be accepted or not by the Parliament of St. Martin. In my letter to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, I also stressed that point. I went even further and I suggested that if the Dutch government would give St. Martin some breathing space where these two matters are concerned, I would take it upon myself to do my utmost to get the draft national ordinance here on the floor of Parliament. From all indications, that request has not been honored because in the letter of the 13th of October by Minister Plasterk, again, it is put clearly forward, these are the conditions, and without them, no aid would be forthcoming. What now? So, the draft national ordinance for the integrity chamber, which would have to come to the Parliament of St. Martin, there seemed to be an agreement on a draft national ordinance. So I want to make it very clear about the integrity chamber. There is no dispute. Integrity chamber, yes. We have, right now, we are so far that there is an agreement that the integrity chamber of St. Martin will be established by national ordinance. The Dutch government is aware of the content of the draft national ordinance and the Dutch government is saying, fine, so good so far. However, in that ordinance that you have drafted, St. Martin government, we want 3 elements to be changed or added. Those elements are: 1, the appointment of the members to the integrity chamber and integrity board, the matter of the binding nature of the advices that come from the integrity chamber, and thirdly, on the budget. Those are the three items over which there is a disagreement. And I am saying, let us look at what we have agreed on so far. And then it makes it clearer to have a discussion on the points of disagreement. In essence, although there's a little difference there, the same can be said about the matter of the border control. And there again, now, the Dutch minister, Minister Plasterk, is suggesting that between St. Martin and the Netherlands, a joint agreement be made on border control, and the minister has even proposed what he would like to see in this joint agreement. Up until now, matters pertaining to justice, and especially where they touch the kingdom level or the 4 countries level, those matters are discussed in consultation with all ministers of justice. And I say all of this to say that I think that we should not have a discussion on the integrity chamber. Who wants it, who does not want it. That we have passed. We should be able to zoom in on those conditions that the Dutch government is saying, in your draft national ordinance, we would like to see these matters. That is where the pain is. That is where the disagreement is. And I took note of the Prime Minister's statement with respect to a plan B. I don't know of this plan B. I would love to hear of the feasibility of a plan B. Because without that assurance, I think that it would behoove the government of St. Martin to come to an understanding, and Parliament has a role to play in this because that's where the ultimate word lies, to come to an understanding about those additional points in the ordinance for the integrity chamber. I cannot, with the best will in the world, seeing up until now only that one possibility for the kind of financing that has been promised, say that I am going to close the door to the conditions as put forward for that aid. And what does this mean? In essence, it means that again, I am going to ask, especially our government, to consider what are the scenarios if we pin the integrity chamber issue under the umbrella of giving up autonomy. I stated in a post in response to a question someone asked me, and I want to repeat it here. I don't believe that there is another person, and if there are, they're very few, as passionate about the matter of autonomy and country status as I am. And I say that with all due respect. However, I am also one who understands the intricacies of the relationships within the kingdom. Country status, between countries and the kingdom, and I have spoken about this so often. But if anybody feels that we have the time as a community to fight that battle now and have funds locked in because of that, or rather not locked in would mean we have them secured, but not secured while we fight the autonomy battle, I have to disagree. If the feeling is that this matter of the Dutch not being fair, and it is not fair what they're doing and how they are applying these conditions. But that to me is not the question or the fight that we should have right now, because at the end of the day, what are the scenarios in front of us? And if tomorrow or this evening I get a plausible plan for St. Martin going forward, I would be the first one to retract my position on the matter of the aid from the Netherlands. But for right now, I am saying the autonomy fight is a fight we cannot fight now over the backs of the people, not knowing how, for example, the government is going to finance the things that need to be financed, its operational costs, its paying of all of the responsibilities that the government of St. Martin has. Where is the money going to come from that is necessary, not tomorrow, actually like yesterday? Yes, we're getting insurance money. Yes, we're going to be able to call on funding, I hope, from other sources. But right now, that commitment that is there, we don't have it equaled nowhere else. And so, as far as I'm concerned, those conditions that have been put there, I could speak, but at the end of the day, it is Parliament that has to make that choice. And we have to do it quickly. They want a mutual day. The Dutch government wants a mutual agreement on border control, but the Dutch government itself has to realize that while we could say, sure, we want to enter a mutual agreement with you, that's what a mutual agreement is all about, an agreement between two or more parties. But on the other hand, it has to be within the legal context of the kingdom. Not even the Dutch government could make us sign a document that is outside of the legal context. What they are requiring right now is that the government expresses its willingness to enter into such a mutual agreement. I also took note of the fact that the Prime Minister has indicated he is willing to travel to the Netherlands. Minister Plasterk, in his letter, has indicated that he is willing to send his civil servants to reach a better understanding on these points as soon as possible. And I'm asking myself, what is standing in the way of that happening? However, I repeat again, we need to break it down in what is exactly in front of us right now. That is a draft national ordinance on the integrity chamber, and the Dutch government is saying, change those things in there for me. And you have the matter of an agreement which already exists in terms of the input of the royal marechaussees and others into the whole justice chain, and apparently they want to fortify that in the way that it has been explained in the letter of the Dutch minister. So I think this is what we should focus on. I am going to be asking the government to send that proposal or that draft national ordinance to the Parliament as soon as possible, because with all of the talk, and I am one of those who constantly am highlighting how I think that while there are 4 countries in the kingdom, it is not on an equal basis. We don't have to fool ourselves about that being the case. But in the meantime, right now, the question is, what are we willing to give or even give in to, and in exchange for what? And given the dire straits that we are in, I will encourage other members of Parliament to do as much as possible to secure that there is some light that we can give the people of St. Martin during these times. The needs out there are many. And how do we fill these needs? We can talk, I could talk for the next year about what I think about the relationship and what it means being a country in the kingdom. I do not believe even, and again with all due respect, that what could we get out of what we believe would be hanging the issue of the kingdom and how they're treating the Dutch government, that is, and how they're treating St. Martin. And while we might get some sympathy for that picture, what does it do in essence to help the people of St. Martin? So I am going to be talking to the members of parliament, explaining them. I'm sure there are going to be those who might agree with me and those who definitely will disagree. But until I have or see or I'm convinced of another plan to at least help us move from where we are today, and where are we today? We are looking at a draft budget, a draft amended budget for 2017 that is going to come to Parliament with, as the Minister of Finance indicated, approximately 150 million guilders deficit. That is not just a deficit on paper. That means that we do not have the money to do 150 million guilders worth of things that need to be done. 2018, what is the prospect in front of us? The budget, we have a budget, a draft budget 2018 right now in Parliament. I sent to ask the government because I realized that we cannot push that budget. Things have changed drastically as of the evening of the 5th, morning of the 6th of September last. So that budget too has to change. What is the finance minister's projection for that? 250 million guilders deficit. Now, if this would not cause sleepless nights, it should cause sleepless nights. What does a deficit of 250 million guilders mean? It means that in the budget of the government of St. Martin, an amount of 250 million guilders cannot be covered. What does it mean for the many persons who have lost their roofs and didn't have an insurance, don't have a job? Where do we start? And if the Dutch government is going to say to me, I have heard all kind of numbers, and I think the Dutch government should be forthcoming in telling us exactly what it is, so that we can also put that in our planning. But once I am told this is the kind of money that we are willing to make available to you, we don't know how yet, grants, loan. We haven't heard from the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin, which I think should be a partner in all of these discussions, especially the financial and economic discussions. I am saying I will go to nearly any length to secure that that type of funding can be put to the use of the people of St. Martin, who today are suffering, a government that does not know how we're going to cover our deficit of nearly a third of what we know to be our annual budget. We gotta, I hate to, but we gotta take and move the discussion about the autonomy and whether we're giving up peace or giving up or not giving up peace further down the road. And the Parliament is going to have to make that call on the integrity chamber and those three matters that I indicated the Dutch government wants to have. And give or take a little, the same applies to the matter of the border, of the control of the border control. So, and clearly when I get into these type of issues, I become very passionate about it. But it is a situation that I think that we have not seen the worst of the results of Irma. We have not seen those yet. People on St. Martin, I can imagine that for so many of us, you just don't know where to begin. And I think that also holds true for the government of St. Martin. And we just have to be honest and realistic with what is ahead of us. And that will be my position. As I mentioned, I am going to stress it like I'm stressing it to you, to all members of Parliament, and ask the government if the Integrity Chamber draft ordinance, which has to, if it can come to Parliament as soon as possible, so that the people of St. Martin can know what to expect or what not to expect.